Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of this year, 2025, of Putting the Human into Technology with me, Gethin Ellis. And today I'm joined by Alice Kershaw, who is the Head of Digital Transformation for the Wildlife Trusts. Welcome, Alice.
Hey, nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. We'll just dive straight into it, Alice, if that's okay. Can you just start by telling me a little bit about yourself and the organisation that you work for?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying what the Wildlife Trust is, because you might have noticed on the description here, it's plural. And the Wildlife
Yes,
Trust
I
is
did.
actually a federation of 47 independent charities that all work together under the same strategy to bring nature back. So there's a Wildlife Trust wherever you are in the UK. We have local grassroots focused organisations that cover everywhere from Scotland right through to Alderney. So we cover the UK and the Crown dependencies. We have nearly 1 million members. We have about 38,000 volunteers. We have staff of over 3,000 across the whole federation. And we manage around 3,000 Wildlife Trust reserves and sites, and we also give land management advice, which makes us one of the biggest landholders in the UK, probably in the kind of top 6 or 7 of landholders, but they're often
Wow.
quite small sites, so you may not
Yeah.
realise quite how many there are. We did find out the other day, we used to use the stat that there are more Wildlife Trust reserves than there are McDonald's in the UK, and I've always made the joke, Greggs are ahead of us, but apparently we now have more Wildlife Trust reserves than there are Greggs. So every time you see a Greggs, just think there is an equivalent Wildlife Trust reserve somewhere out there, just to give you an idea of the scale.
So just humor me with this question then. How big are these plots of land? Like what sizes would they be?
Well, it can be. Well, we've recently, in fact, I should do a plug. We're currently fundraising for purchasing the Rothbury estate, which is 9,800 hectares of land
Wow.
in Northumberland, which, if we purchase it, will become one of the largest rewilding sites in the UK, if not Europe. So it goes from that right down to near me here in Bradford and Leeds. We have Adel Dam, which is a really small part of a park, which is beautiful, wet woodland, really nice, great to go and walk around. But that's absolutely tiny. It's just a couple of hectares. So we have a real scale that we work
Yeah.
across.
Wow. Cool. Okay. Well, if you give me after this, if you send me the link, I'll pop it on the blog for the GoFundMe page, so we can
Brilliant.
any traffic we get afterwards, the people can get directed there. So that'd be awesome.
Oh,
Brilliant.
fantastic.
All right. Cool. So it sounds like use the word. Was it a conglomerate? It was
Federation.
a federation of different charities come together. I guess from I'm going to say a management or an IT infrastructure, technology, data perspective, that must take some sort of managing. So can you share with us how sort of technology and data helps your organisation and how it would help the wider charities involved in your
Yeah.
organisation as well?
So we are independent. So effectively, Wildlife Trusts, I work in terms of helping coordinate the strategy. So as head of digital transformation, my job is to help us make the most of digital. And by digital, we mean kind of the processes, the technology, the skills, the confidence, not just tech. It's about how do we use kind of digital technology to do the things that matter to us. So it's different in every trust. There is a different context. So we have some shared services that we kind of deliver out to trusts from the Central Wildlife Trust. But effectively, they're things like CRMs or finance systems. We're looking at a HR system. We're looking at things of kind of that nature that might support people on a really foundational level. They can choose whether or not they take those up. If they do, they're supported by a kind of central team. If they don't, they're absolutely, they can choose whatever they want. So we don't have a kind of one big infrastructure to rule them all. What we are working on at the moment, and actually we've just deployed the first bit of it this week, is a new data lake project. So we're looking at how do we actually bring data together at scale for the benefit of all wildlife trusts, looking at things that they might not have the capacity or the ability to do themselves, because effectively we need to bring data together from all of the federation, and no individual wildlife trust is going to do that. So we need a kind of centralized, and I use this with a very small c, kind of data kind of storage infrastructure, which allows us to bring in data on kind of spatial data about the reserves that we manage, actions that we're taking for nature, actions communities are taking, where our volunteers are, members and supporters are, and also be able to enrich that and then feed those insights back to trusts so that they can understand a bit more about the context they're working in, because we know that the grassroots local intelligence is the critical thing for how they work. So that's kind of how we serve the federation from and what's called the Royal Society of Wildlife Trust, I should say, which is the kind of central one, is that we effectively provide some services that they can choose to pick up or not. And then there may be services that we realise actually make much more sense to be provided at kind of, I was going to say national scale, but it's actually international, obviously, with the countries, and like the data lake. And we have shared data sharing principles, and we're currently working on data sharing agreements that will enable all of that to work. That's where we kind of pick up the support there.
Oh, amazing. Okay, that's the data lake stuff's really interesting, and I might just pick your brain a little bit more around that now. I've got the next question I was going to ask was around sort of challenges you face, and I guess I'm going to kind of frame it in the context of your data lake, which is that central repository. Do you have any? What have been the biggest challenges implementing that with the 47 different organisations, and how is that driving those organisations to deliver on their mission and to deliver against their goal on what they want to achieve?
Yeah, so it's worth saying that, like, so it's literally we've deployed some of the tech, like I think yesterday is when the kind of like liner of the data lake, to use a kind of phrase, went in. So we've only just got the technical infrastructure. We have been prototyping though, sharing data at scale with things like looking at insights around kind of where our members are, where there's opportunities for new members compared to, for example, like saturation rates, things like that, to help with how we kind of personalize stuff to supporters, see where we might be missing opportunities. So that's been working so far. I would say the biggest challenges are probably to do with the kind of, well, when wildlife trusts date from all different periods of history, and some of them are well over 100 years old, at no point 100 years ago did someone think, oh, it'd be really handy if we stored all this data in a way that we could interoperable with other trusts. Like, that was never an idea. So we've collected loads of data, loads of great information, loads of great insights, but actually we don't necessarily always have shared data models and standards, because when they were originally setting up these processes for collecting data, we didn't think we'd need to combine it at scale. We certainly didn't think this kind of technology would exist. So we're kind of dealing with things that no one would have predicted when they started doing it. But now we're looking at, shared kind of enterprise data models of like making sure our most critical data sets, we have an agreement of kind of what those are. That's probably quite technical, unexciting answer to the issues, but
it's exciting for me, because that's kind of what I do. So it's always interesting to talk about. So in terms of you're very early on in this project, I think, which is cool. What's the sort of, what business value do you see it driving? I think you've touched on it a little bit already, because I guess no, I don't know what technology you're using for this, if it's like Databricks or if it's something else, right? But usually there's a reasonable, at the very least, a reasonable amount of investment up front, and usually when you're, particularly in the charity sector, when you're spending significant amount of money, you want it to return for you. So what's the end goal? What types you mentioned, like I think like churn and data saturation and all that kind of stuff. Would any of your trusts be interested in like looking at protecting species and all that kind of cool wildlife? I'm going to call it wildlife stuff. Of actually looking after the wildlife in their areas.
I mean, that was our first prototype, was around membership, because we have this shared CRM service. So it was basically a kind of a practicality if we already had a CRM where there was about 30 trusts already using it, so we could use that as a kind of pilot. And secondly, because it had a direct financial kind of benefit, so we could kind of say, actually, if it turns out you're not claiming gift aid as much as another trust, maybe have a look at what they're doing. You can learn about how they. So it was that reason. But the data lake itself will be covering all different kinds of business critical data for us, which obviously includes things like habitat conditions, actions we're taking on the reserves, what kind of work is going on, and how that links with things like where our volunteers are doing work, for example, will be something that'll be quite interesting to see. So it should support us with kind of wider, both identifying the impact we've had to date and being able to support modeling where we need to take actions next, because it's not just about kind of obviously historic nice to have, it's about how do we deliver our strategy for the longer term. So can we look at, for example, where there's good opportunities for more kind of carbon sequestration projects, where there's opportunities for habitat improvement that we may not have spotted quite as easily, where there's ways to kind of join up different habitats in a way we hadn't identified. So there's a project that's called Space for Nature, which is a fantastic project run by Surrey Wildlife Trust, which I mentioned far too much. So if anyone's watching any other interviews with me, I mention it all the time. It's fantastic. And that's using Earth observation data and kind of machine learning models to identify the condition of habitats and to help model what might happen to those habitats in the future. And to be able to do that and combine it with what actions we're taking for nature, what's going on in that area, and open data sets as well. So river quality, water quality, generally information on, kind of access to nature, health information.
And all that stuff's publicly available.
Yeah, so where we have publicly available information, we can bring that into our data lake and kind of enrich it. So the big benefit for trusts is that it will do a number of use cases. So initially it will be looking predominantly at the kind of land management side of it and the kind of spatially located data around our reserves. It will also be looking at members and supporters and where they are and combining those bits of information. But as well as that, we have kind of big surveys that we do called things like the Great Big Nature Survey, where we asked about people's values, and we'll be able to map that spatially. So if you're in a trust, you can find out what people in your area think about nature or what their values might be. And that's really useful for targeting campaigns, for targeting information you might want to give people, and give a bit of more of a kind of personalized approach effectively to what people really care about in your area. So it has a number of different benefits, including the fact that it reduces the kind of manual need for creating dashboards, because we'll be able to do those and people will be able to go in and kind of play with them rather than have to start from scratch. But the big one is adding kind of giving data back that's business critical, but also like enriched by a kind of wider context of open data, like best practice we can find, information that's out there, and the insights already served to people. So it's not just pure like, here's a dashboard. The idea is you will also get insights that will help you to deliver on what that dashboard is telling you. So, you might, it might say, if your gift aid is low, then do this, or it might say, here, another project has done this based on the same kind of stats that you have. And that's where the big advantage is for us.
Yeah, it allows you to share, doesn't it? It allows you to share the insights. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so in terms of you're doing this centrally. Is one of the challenges for you going forward? Clearly, you can give the data and give the insights to these different trusts. Have you got to do anything from a sort of training, building a data culture type perspective in the different trusts to get them on board, or are they all kind of bought in and all really keen? I'm guessing it's probably somewhere trust vary accordingly, but it's just interesting to see how you've approached like disseminating the information that you're generating.
Yeah, and you're spot on. The answer is with the Wildlife Trust, because we're sometimes described as like a murmuration, and that we're all individual birds moving together but in different shapes. Yes, it's always different to every trust, and it has been really key for us that it runs twin tracked with other projects that are going around digital skills, around kind of like you say about confidence and about data sharing. So it was really important before the data lake was deployed that in November, December, we've been talking through and had agreed data sharing principles. So as a federation, we've agreed certain things around sharing data. So we kind of have like open by design data. So we share, instead of sharing by exception with each other, we share by design, instead of, making sure that we have good quality data, making sure that we have access to it and it's kind of usable, and that we're kind of basically more kind of positive data culture. So we started by having this agreed in the federation, but we also have projects like Evidence Emergency, which is a group of trusts are running, which is all about how we use conservation evidence and how do we use that better. And they're running whole programs of identifying skills need, creating like checklists for skills, creating competency frameworks around conservation data. So there's all these things running kind of twin tracked, because absolutely we don't just want to like dump a system and just kind of go, here we go, data's available. It's all about like, how do we do data as a service, and how do we make sure that it's kind of absolutely underpinning our strategy. Like when you look at the 2030 strategy we have, like pretty much 100% of it relies on us having access to decent quality data and insights, regardless of what we're doing, whether it's campaigning, whether it's marketing, whether it's managing land, whether it's giving advice. We need to know what we've previously done. We need to model where there might be the most impact from what we're planning on doing. It all relies on that kind of data set. So we have a lot of people who are on board, and we also have a lot of people who are really just doing delivery day to day. And they're just like, why are you talking to me about data models? I don't want to have a discussion about that. So it's like, how do we make it real for people of like, you don't need to know, as it happens. So it is on Databricks that we're using. But that's not necessarily like, you can go on our intranet at work and people can find what the tech stack is. that we know that's not the point. Like, it's the right
No.
tech stack for the kind of data we're using.
Yeah.
But like, that's not going to win. Some people that will win it because they'll be like, oh, that's interesting, I want to have a look. Other people will be like, what am I going to see in 3 months when you've got the first use case up
Yeah.
and running, and how am I going to use it? So that's a whole other program as well.
So I've got a conference talk, and I've mentioned this all the time actually, but it's called Building a Data-Driven Culture in Your Business. And one of the quotes, one of the things I state in there is people don't actually want a data culture; they just want the benefit it brings. And
Yeah,
no one's going to care if it's on Databricks or Fabric or an Excel spreadsheet, as long as it gives the insight to allow them to make a better decision. Awesome. So it sounds like you're. I did have a question around. Excuse me, one second. I'm just going to mute myself. Sorry about that, Alice.
No,
my question was around as a sort of central. I'm going to say a central service provider. And I don't. No one take that out of context. But you're providing the data lake and data products for the Federation of Charities. How do you deal with the differing requirements of each, or do they differ? Because I imagine that's quite a challenge as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've done quite a few requirements gathering workshops already to start to have a look at some of this. They do differ. We're kind of focusing on the things that we all agree we have to deliver. So we have a shared 2030 strategy, which has kind of goals, transformations, and enabling priorities. And across those, it has action plans. And so we've actually gone through, and the backlog for the data lake is based on the things we know everyone has already collectively agreed to do. So we have a kind of data service which will give all trusts access to certain elements. If there are bespoke needs, then they can come to us, we can have a discussion. We have kind of steering groups, advisory groups, and decision-making kind of processes, so we can make sure that it's not just people who shout the loudest who are getting what they want, but it's actually the things that are most used to the most trusts that are going to be going through. But then there's also, weighted against strategic importance, whether they've got a project that specifically is funding elements of this, for example. So it's trying to kind of weight that through is quite critical. So yes, there are some things that are the same and there are some things that are different, which, as a slight aside, is a brilliant way of getting innovation. It's not central out. We know that so many of the great ideas that get kind of rolled out across the Federation come from trusts, because they're all trying to solve kind of this, often similar problems, but in very different contexts. They come up with their own really interesting kind of technological solutions or ideas or ways of working. And kind of a lot of my job is just finding those and scaling them. Where are people already doing something great, and how do we make sure that other trusts know about it, is a really critical thing, because that's what there isn't always the opportunity to do.
Cool. Okay. Right. So we've looked at how you've been using technology and data transform, and we've talked a little bit about your challenges. Or I don't think I've actually asked you in terms of the biggest challenge. I'll just ask very briefly, because I know we've touched on them. The biggest challenge in terms of going down this route. What was that for the Wildlife Trust, and how did you sort of work your way around it? And you've probably told me already in your answer, in fairness, but I'll ask the question anyway.
I'll have a think. I think some of the big challenge is that, I mean, we're hugely delivery focused, and we don't have a lot of, for example, in-house development skills here at the Wildlife Trust. So I've just recruited a data engineer who starts next week, which is going to be very exciting. But there are going to be some new kind of technical roles coming in to support this, because that just isn't there. And that makes it a challenge when we're trying to, for example, assess systems, because we need to kind of rely on external support. We don't have our own in-house kind of someone to challenge suppliers, things like that. And I'm all for, we want it to be a real partnership with suppliers, want to be able to work it. But I'm kind of aware how much we're sometimes a little bit on the back foot, and also people kind of think, oh, you're a cute little animal charity, you don't know what you're talking about. And so there's a little bit of a mix of that, I think, which can be a bit of a challenge, which is a slightly different challenge to the challenge of working in a federated structure, but the challenge of kind of people, we are so low in capacity on those skills, and I think a lot of people don't quite realize quite how low that is. We can't just kind of leverage someone really quickly to come and help with the data model. So any supplier that's working with us has to be able to kind of grasp that we really do need a lot more support than might be expected.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, that's interesting and good to know. And this sounds like a really exciting journey that you're on. Really, before we get to the fun question, the last question I've got is, you're on this journey now, looking ahead. don't want to put words in your mouth, and clearly you see technology and data shaping the future here. But how do you see it? How do you see data and technology affecting the wildlife trusts, the charities at the part of it, and perhaps even the wider not-for-profit sector as a whole?
I mean, we've managed to get this far without saying the words AI, which is amazing. So I'm going to ruin that. Because basically, there's probably something about that coming down the track that I think, I think effectively the role that machine learning and generative AI is going to have within organizations like the Wildlife Trust is bound to be huge. There's a couple of good reports that have just come out, one about hype and conservation and one about horizon scanning and conservation. I will send you both the links to those as well, because they're really, really interesting of looking like, because we can use things like machine learning for like monitoring, acoustic monitoring, what's coming, what's being spotted in camera traps, like I was talking about with Space for Nature, what's happening in terms of predicting future kind of quality of land. How do we, there's so many things there that we could use, with the tension that obviously it's hugely carbon intensive. So how we kind of balance off the kind of ethical side, our values-based side, and making sure we have really, really good use cases for that kind of AI is going to be, well, and is a very live discussion. We already have projects that use AI. We have Warwickshire Wildlife Trust using eDNA. We have Mammal Web, which is a species ID kind of machine learning tool, which was developed by Durham Wildlife Trust and Durham University. So we have a whole suite of things we're already doing around AI, but I think there's now challenges with generative AI bringing in issues around hallucinations and also around the kind of security, both of which have kind of reputational risks on top of the carbon side. So that's where we're being much more kind of cautious, but I think it will start to really impact. And this, to kind of tie back to the data lake idea, effectively, if we have our own data source that we are confident in, and we think this is good quality business data which understands our specific context, then potentially that gives us the basis for using, as a kind of training data for an AI that we might use ourselves to help kind of predict a model in different ways. And as you know, Databricks has the ability to kind of bring machine learning on top of it. So we're starting to look at how that might fit in. But I think increasing like abilities to monitor, like eDNA is absolutely fascinating. You take samples of water and it will tell you what species have swum through it. I mean, that is absolutely really? It sounds like science fiction. It's incredible. The amount of stuff we can now ID and predict through like camera trap footage, but it's creating huge volumes of data. And I think the kind of storage, analytics, compute power of that is going to be something we haven't really yet kind of fully grappled with, and it's quite hard to really predict where that's going because it's kind of gone incrementally up. So that plus the kind of data and digital skills we're going to need, like it's back to that. I don't know who said it, but someone said like in the future every job's going to be a digital job, and I think we're kind of almost at that point, even for an organization like ours where a lot of people are out on reserves. There's digital components to what they're doing and how they're recording things, and hopefully making their jobs easier. But I think it's going to. I think there will be some big shapes for the not-for-profit sector. I think the risk is we don't have those technical skills. And I think that does mean that we can, I don't think we're being naive about AI. I think actually quite a lot of people are challenging it, but also looking at the opportunities in a really, really credible way. But I think there's a risk that society changes as a result of AI without us really grasping what that means for us as charities. And I'm interested in that kind of space. So if anyone's watching this, listening to this, and has stuff on that, I would love to have it sent over, because it's something I'm starting to look at in terms of how it impacts in kind of unexpected ways on conservation.
Fab. Okay. Well, if anyone is listening that's got information on that, please do get in touch with Alice. Alice, that's awesome. Thank you very much. So it's been really insightful sort of 25, 30 minutes. I've got one more question for you, but I've got four. But I'm not going to get you to answer all four. Right? So I think it's a bit unfair. It's like a kind of a fun closing question, and basically, the questions are: tell us an interesting fact about yourself that people don't know. If you weren't working in technology, what other career profession would you see yourself doing? The best piece of career advice you've ever been given, or what advice would you give your younger self starting out in the IT industry?
I mean, the bottom one would surely be invest in Bitcoin. I'm not going to say that. I don't invest in Bitcoin now. Anyone? Well, I would say, so interesting fact about myself that most people don't know. So one of the ones that I've just done a talk with Cast, I've said I really like long distance running and I do ultra marathons, and that's great. The actual best fact about me is I have a joke on a penguin biscuit. So, which is the absolute highlight of my career.
Go on, you're gonna have to share the joke now. I need
I
that.
don't. To be fair, I've actually got it written up on the wall. I wrote, it's what did the genie ask? No, oh my god, I messed it up. My own joke. What did the penguin ask for from the genie in the lamp?
I don't know. What did the penguin ask for?
3 fishes. It's not a good joke, but it is a penguin themed joke. And that was because during 2020, me and my friend at work would cheer each other up during the pandemic by sending each other ridiculous penguin related jokes. And then they did a call out for penguin biscuit jokes. And they sent me loads of penguin biscuits. And honestly, I've not really wanted to eat them since because I had a whole suitcase full. So there you go. There's a fact that actually I don't think I've ever said publicly before.
That's brilliant. That's awesome. So you've got a penguin joke. Just a question on the ultra marathons. Explain to me like what an ultra marathon is, so I'm aware. Obviously, a marathon's 26 miles. I'm assuming this is like 100 miles or something.
Yeah, so anything over 26 miles is an ultra marathon. It's something I really enjoy doing, and in fact, well, hopefully trains permitting on Saturday, depending on when this goes out. But on the 11th, I'll be taking part in this. Excellent. I'll be going out. I'll be taking part in the Spine Challenger South, which is 108 miles from Edale to Hawes on the Pennine Way, which is a race I'm really looking forward to doing. But that's the kind of thing I like doing in my spare time. And people come sometimes go, "Oh, that's really far away from technology." I'm like, it kind of is and kind of isn't, because I've got a GPS unit, I've got a watch with the map on it. Someone's tracking me on a thing on my shoulder, and you can follow me online. So kind of, but I really benefit from digital and technology in those races.
Brilliant, Alice. Thank you. Well, look, that's the end of my questions, and I guess that's the end of the show. Thank you very much for coming on and sharing that insight. It's been an absolute pleasure for coming on, and good luck with your data lake and all the transformation and change you've got coming down the line.
Brill. Thanks very much.
Thank you.